Hello, and welcome to the Product Rising podcast. Today's guest has one of the most unconventional paths to AI entrepreneurship that we've featured to date on this show. Kelly Anderson is a chef, technologist, food innovator, and founder and CEO of DyeConverter. She is also the first chef in the world certified by MIT in AI and machine learning. Before becoming a tech founder, Kelly spent more than a decade leading R&D, product development, and innovation initiatives for some of the world's most recognizable brands, including Nestlé, Disney, Impossible Foods, Panera Bread, Starbucks, and US Foods. Her work has spanned both consumer packaged goods and food service, giving her a front row seat to how products are developed, tested, manufactured, regulated, and ultimately brought to consumers. As food manufacturers face increasing pressure to remove synthetic dyes and transition to natural alternatives, Kelly recognized a challenge that many outside the industry never see. Replacing artificial colors isn't simply a matter of swapping one ingredient for another. Natural pigments can behave very differently depending on factors like heat, acidity, processing methods, packaging, and shelf life. That insight led her to found DyeConverter, an AI-assisted decision engine that helps food and beverage brands identify, evaluate, and implement natural color alternatives while navigating the scientific, operational, and regulatory complexities of reformulation ahead of the FDA's 2028 timeline. Welcome to Product Rising, Kelly. We are thrilled to have you. This is the most unique topic that I think we focused on in a really long time, and I have so many questions.
Well, thank you. I'm getting teary-eyed. My life sounds so much more intriguing when you say it like that. Thank you for the kind intro. I appreciate it.
Well, you've been described, and you describe yourself as a chef-technologist. Those aren't two disciplines most people expect to hear together. So what does that mean to you?
Well, I'm not a food scientist. I've worked very closely with them in my career, but I'm not. So I can't qualify myself as that. But I did take the leap in a very technological heavy side of the industry. And so I've been sort of marrying the two sides. I knew that there was something I wanted to do with the certification. I wasn't sure what yet, but the idea that I can help food brands usher in some of the new technology, and then I can speak to both sides on the CPG side and the technological side, it makes me a chef technologist by default.
So how did your culinary background shape the way you approach innovation and problem solving in tech?
R&D is research and development for packaged foods is always about failure. It's about mitigating the fail. It's about finding out what doesn't work so that you can hone in on what does, right? And I think that speaks to a lot of how we're using AI is that there's nothing, absolutely nothing perfect about AI yet. And so there's a lot of trial and error. And I think that the program that I went to at MIT, we weren't learning prompting or how to generate images and doing anything for marketing. We learned under the hood. We learned how the data sets were training the models and how to verify the data, how to analyze the data, and how they were pattern forming. And I think all of those things were similar to what we were doing in R&D, is recording every step and analyzing every step and then trying to determine what would work and what if we added this, what if we took away that? And that's a lot of the same thing when you're working with AI today.
So if you've worked across all these different companies, what is the type of role that you are serving in? If you're not a food scientist, you're a food technologist. And that difference, can you explain a little bit what that means?
Well, I don't think I became a chef technologist until after I became a tech founder. Prior to that, I was a corporate executive chef in innovations or R&D, depending on what department needed me. US Foods was a lot of private label and a lot of sort of testing, sensory testing, and what they call cuttings, which is when you would cut one brand against the other and figure how they stood up to each other. Disney was very different. Disney was food service and innovation. So we had all of the studio campuses in Burbank, and that was more about the operational side, but we were developing. That's where we had our contract with Impossible. This was way back in the day, and we were R&Ding their product and seeing how it stood up to food service cooking and serving, and we were trying out new flavors on the patrons and reporting back to the company. And so that was fun, and we created a lot of new programs like the grab and go programs, but it wasn't a lot of R&D. Nestlé was the heaviest R&D. I was working in plant-based, which was, again, a lot of science and chemistry that goes into plant-based foods, a lot of vegan and keto. And so that really helped shaped, it kind of put the cherry on top is, gradually throughout my career, getting a little bit more and more chemistry in what I was doing. It eventually led me to take that leap into way more food science than I had ever expected to.
Yeah. Did you see challenges repeatedly in those roles to sort of accumulate in your brain and you had the wheels turning that you wanted to solve one day in the future that sort of led you here?
I think that it was a little bit of the opposite. When you're a chef, you have to make quick decisions on the fly. You don't have time to sit down and think about it, especially if you're in the middle of food service or some event, or you have to just be willing to make a decision and stick with it, and whatever happens, happens. In R&D, you have the opportunity to be more pragmatic about what you were doing. But I really think it all stemmed from sort of the opposite. I had the really great opportunity to work for two major companies who were very sustainability oriented and clean label oriented. At Disney, we were a from scratch kitchen, zero waste. We had major sustainability metrics we had to meet. Major. And then Nestle, I was working with the Good Food Institute, and then everything I was working was already clean label. And I think what happened was when I discovered that with AI, I could get research done really fast, things that would take me weeks or days prior, data sets that weren't really available to me or hard to find. I could pull on a thread and I could find really the truth about how something was made or what these companies' practices really are. And I think I was really very disheartened at what I was finding. Because on one hand, I saw that AI could have possibilities that were really great and sustainable and regenerative farming and clean label ingredients. And then I was also discovering that all this time, I'm not going to say I was being duped. I felt very naive, that I didn't know the depth of how some of our food system works and how badly it's broken. And that sort of led me to go, okay, well, now that I have this knowledge, I have all this culinary knowledge, and I have really great companies I've worked for, and I have packaged food knowledge. And now I have this technology at my fingertips. I've learned to aggregate the data and clean it and analyze it. What am I going to do with it? And that's, I think, when the aha moment came that they need help reformulating the dyes. From there, it sort of snowballed. Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like it could be the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's really thrilling to hear that there's somebody like you in that mix to identify what some of the problems could be. This is one, but there certainly could be more. As far as the synthetic dyes, most people are aware of the conversation we're having at the political level about removing a few of the most harmful dyes in foods. Why is replacing synthetic dyes actually so difficult?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's also something that I really had to learn about as well, because we all kind of know how they're made, and we all know that they have certain effects on certain people, that studies have shown this and studies have shown that. But what we don't know is that they are cheap, but they are robust. So they pay for themselves within the first run, the factory run, right? Done, right? Now it's just making money, profit off of it. But they are robust, meaning they won't break under heat. They won't separate in emulsions or oil and vinegar. The color stays strong. It doesn't fade based on packaging or oxygenization. And that's why the industry was so reticent to replace them. And that was something I also wasn't aware of it. And a lot of food or R&D teams are running into that problem now, as they think, oh, if we used this many parts per million of red 40, we can use this many parts per million of beetroot. And it couldn't be the opposite. Beetroot will turn brown if it's exposed to high heat. It will separate your low pH or high acidic foods. And so the idea that this was ever going to be easy for the food industry would have been naive for anybody to think. And the more I researched it, and the more I realized that natural dyes were more expensive, they were more fragile, they were certainly more fickle. I knew that this was going to be an area where I needed to help. I didn't need to wag my finger. I needed to provide a solution that would help them get there, basically.
And in this space, there's a special set of risks, right? You alluded to a few of them, which is things like the appearance of or the aesthetic of the food changes. So getting people to cook with it or purchase it is one thing, but what are some other risks?
Well, it's such an early industry. It's burgeoning and it's slated for huge growth over the next 5 to 10 years. We're already seeing more brands and color formulas enter the market on a weekly basis, right? The FDA is trying very hard to keep up with that demand and either certify or not certify certain colors that can be used or certain natural ingredients that can be used as food colors. For instance, some of the other trade-offs is there's a difference between beetroot and beetroot red. So beetroot is you would take your beets, sliced beets, whatever, you turn it into pumice or powder in various methods, and you can use that to color your food. Sometimes they put other natural chemicals on it to preserve it or to make it more heat resistant, but it's pretty much just a simple natural product. But it's very risky to heat and pH. Then you have beetroot red, and that's more of a trademark name. And that is a fermented product that the FDA has not approved yet. They were going to, and then everybody started kind of up in arms about it, and so they paused. And the reason they paused is that this fermented product uses genetically engineered techniques to speed up the yeast reaction, the fermentation process. It's not genetically modified. There was no genetic splitting or replacing of DNA or anything like that. But to some people, they go, no, if this is genetically engineered in any shape or form, we cannot call it natural, so it cannot be approved in the natural section of the food dyes. So that's just one of the regulatory hurdles on top of the culinary hurdles, because you're going to have a lot more success in your kitchen baking a cake or some cookies or puddings or souffles, whatever, because the box is going to tell you how much to use. You're going to know, and it's a small batch. It's controllable, right? When your factory runs of 1,000 gallons of ice cream or 1,600 4-ounce bags of chips, there's a whole other reactionary time period in there. The humidity in the factory, how hot do your ovens run, a million different variables that need to be considered. And that's also why it's so difficult to replace with something that isn't as sturdy and robust as artificial dyes were.
Well, the timing of the regulatory changes and the availability of data sets for AI applications like this could not be better. Tell us what DyeConverter does. Exactly how does that product work?
So for the non-food geek, I liken it to Indeed. So Shannon goes on Indeed and says, hi, I'm Shannon. I live in this city. This is my title. This is how much I make. But this is the job I want. This is how much I want to make. I only want to travel this many miles from home every day. I want my commute time, blah, 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 blah. And then Indeed goes and searches its database for all of the jobs that are closest to the match of what you just requested, right? That's exactly what DyeConverter does. The food brand will put in the category, the processing, the pH levels, the parts per million. In the process, you have drop-down menus that are, is it confectionery? Is it ice cream? Is it beverage? Those start to auto-populate certain matrices based on what we know, that a dairy would be a fat protein base, right? So on and so forth, all that geeky stuff. And then DyeConverter goes and searches my database of all of the FDA-approved colors and SKUs available in the United States, as many as I can get, and goes, here you go. These are the best matches for your process. So the dye that pops up as a match for your beverage is going to be very different than the one that pops up for your cupcakes or frosting, because they're very different applications. Yeah. I don't sell the dye. I don't make the dye. I just match make.
Okay, and so I imagine there is, like in all the conversations we're having about AI applications, there's generally a human in the loop somewhere. So on the receiving end of the information here, there is somebody who has to be able to evaluate the results and make decisions based on whatever other information they have in their brain that maybe isn't included in the tool set. Can you describe that process? What kind of person would use this tool and what do they need to know?
So this would be for your new product development managers, your research and development teams, your food scientists that work for consumer packaged good brands like a Nestlé, like a Kraft. You also have smaller brands. They're not, household names. You also have co-manufacturers that private label or privately produce some of these generic or grocery store brands, right? So one of the main impetus for creating DyeConverter was when the FDA and the HHS announced this. We all knew it was coming, and brands that were smart were preparing for it. But we did not expect it to just be one fell swoop. It was all at once. You have 18 months to get rid of all the colors, right? We're not mandating it yet, right? That was the warning shot that if you don't have it done, you might face fines, right? So I thought about, oh my God, I've been that one culinary consultant or one chef specialist at a small manufacturing company or mid-sized food brand that didn't have a team of research and development specialists or didn't have a food scientist on staff. What were they going to do? Where would they even start? Because I didn't know. I wasn't sure yet. And that's where I started. I said, okay, if that was me and my boss came to me and said, you have 18 months to reformulate 22 SKUs, 4 different colors, I'd be like, where do I start? And that's where I started. I just started researching. I started researching the crops that were then going to be turned into color and how that worked. And then I started researching all the different companies that provided natural dyes and so on and so forth. And then that's when I built the model, a little agent inside that acts as like a mini food scientist. And it gets smarter the more empirical data we feed it. But to answer your question, there's always a human in the loop, because when the user finds the right match, they're automatically connected to the supplier's page where they can, in one click, request a sample. So then that sample is sent to their very busy sales teams, because they're all freaking out right now too, supply and demand. Then they've basically just gotten a hot lead or, a warm sales lead from my platform for doing nothing. And then they can then determine how to close the deal. I cannot advise a team of R&D at a food brand on how to reformulate based just on the data that they put into my platform. I mean, they can call me and hire me for consulting if they want. But the truth is, in this right now with the reformulation of food dyes, there's always a human in the loop, because nothing is guaranteed. The science isn't guaranteed. The color and the shade isn't guaranteed, especially when you want to mix them, especially when your application is a freeze method or a confectionery method. It has to be bench tested. And that's what people don't understand about the food industry, is that there's a ton of trial and error before it ever reaches that grocery store shelf.
Yeah, because it has to taste the way you want it to taste too. And I imagine there's some effect there.
Yeah, there's something called flavor transfer. So spirulina, for example, has this beautiful sort of turquoise, dark aqua color that is fabulous, right? But it's made from algae, and there's a flavor transfer. So dye companies are working on innovative ways to remove that. What you want your cheese to taste like moss, or your popsicle to taste like algae. So they're working on ways to remove that flavor transfer. And then also some brands, they're leaning into the color change by going colorless on some of their products, which I think is fantastic. And then others are just hell-bent on that perfect match. So perfect that their customers would never know. No flavor transfer, no hue transfer. It's the exact same sherbet that it was yesterday. That's going to be harder to keep consistent over time. I think that if I could give the food brands any advice, is lean in to the reformulation change, allow the consumers to come with you on the journey. And I would beg the consumers to be patient. It's not going to taste any different. They won't let that happen, but it might look a little different, and we have to just be okay with that.
You mentioned it's 4 colors. So I've heard about 2, red and blue, and I'm sure they have scientific names. Can you tell us, what is the list?
So anything that you've seen on a label that says FD and C, the FD and C ampersand, is a federally certified artificial color. And you've heard of Red 3 and Red 40. So Red 3 finally got banned after 40 years of a lot of scientific, not proof, but evidence that it could be linked to a lot of bad things, right? Red 40 wasn't too far behind that. Red 40 is being phased out. Blue 1 is being phased out. Yellow 5 and 6, they're 2 different shades, are being phased out. Blue 2 is also being phased out. And green, I want to say green 3, And that is the hardest, for some reason, shade to match. There's just not a lot of green food, so there's not been a lot of developments of green colors. And then on top of that, we have titanium dioxide. And then we've got, I'm sure you've seen on packages, blue lake color, which is an aluminum sort of way that they adhere the dye. So there's various incantations of how these dyes are used. So even if there were only 4 primary colors, the formulaic matrices that it causes based on other ingredients and other reactions is infinity. It's endless.
And then when they're replacing a dye with your tool, a DyeConverter, does it suggest combinations that could achieve the same shades using different ingredients that are natural somehow magically within the tool, or is it only based on things that have been bench tested somewhere else?
That's a great question, because that makes me go off ideation mode. But we had one potential client, a big name, you would know who they are, that requested a demo. And their food scientist was hard on me, asking me very difficult questions. And he finally said, can I search more than one dye at a time? And is there any way that I could see how these 2 colors, 2 different dyes, what they would look like if I wanted to mix them? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm on it. So about a week later, we unveiled what we call the Color Studio. And so you can take any one of the results and you take that into the Color Studio, and it'll give you sort of your tinctorial value, your RGB or hex code number for it. There's also something called a lambda and light refraction, and that's above my college degree, but the food scientists know. And then if you want to combine 2 colors at a time, you could take a safflower yellow and you could take a blue spirulina, and then on our little slider you can see how they would mix together based on what color you put more or less of in. And it gives you that RGB code too. So if you hit that perfect match for your fruit punch or whatever, it'll show you what that RGB code is, so then you can match it precisely to your existing hue or color. Because color and hue and shade, they're all different. And again, you could think that you're in the right color family and you're just maybe not right at that perfect red, and then you add one more drop and suddenly you're like a burgundy black. It's not even the same color family anymore. So it's very tricky to get it right.
Is there a two-way street where a result is then shared back with the system so that everybody else can try that out as well? Or do people really want to keep those results to themselves?
So we are in a bit of a renaissance phase with the data. Food companies know that for everybody to survive, all of the AI and all of the food changes, everything, right? We're in this very strange revolutionary period, that they're going to have to share some data, because it's impossible for everybody to gatekeep it so tightly, especially if it's not a trade secret, right? But right now, no. There's a yes and a no. So I've had some beta testers that I've gone through the reformulation process with that's given me feedback to validate or invalidate my findings. So if they came back and said, your DyeConverter said that this was a 96% match and it failed miserably on our bench test, tell me why. Let's intake that and let me know where we went wrong. And sometimes it's the data, sometimes it's the dye. You never know. So we do get data back from our users who are willing to share that with us, but I cannot make that public. That would be breach of non-disclosure agreements and trade secrets. However, there are a lot of reformulation platforms. That's sort of a natural handshake from DyeConverter to fill in the blank. There's one called Co-Developer. There's one called AKA Foods that will help the brand, by using AI, model how it will look, taste, feel in the end. So, for instance, they wouldn't have to bench test these dyes 30 different ways. They could put it into this platform's model and say, run it at 250 degrees, run it at 350 degrees, run it at 4.5 pH, run it at 6.5 pH. And then the model will tell them which combination of processes gave them the best result. It's fantastic. I'm in awe, but it's a really great way for me to help them find the right product and then pass it on to help them reformulate the product.
Yeah, this is fascinating. We're all consumers of it. That's what's so
100%.
crazy about all this, is that maybe we should know a little bit more about the food we're eating, right?
Well, here's what I tell people. You should not have to spend 45 minutes in the cereal aisle going through and reading each package to find that ingredient that you have a reaction to or that your kid bounces off the walls to. It's really the food industry's job to clean up the mess that they've made. With that said, however, I do think that if anybody out there was going to build for their industry, because the food industry has been saying for a very long time, we need food people to build food tech, because tech people don't know the food industry as intimately as food people do. It's really, everything's a moving part all the time. It's ever changing. It's very hard to pin down. And so people building software systems or problem solving, gap filling technology usually don't really fully understand the food industry and how it works. So, I mean, I found a niche of a niche of a niche. And I kind of think that that's the way you got to do it with AI. If you go too broad, there's too much competition. It breaks easy. You know, there's no real traction. But if you can solve a very specific problem within your industry that bothers you every day, you've got a real flying chance. You do.
I can't help but wonder, can at-home cooks use a tool like this?
There's lots of consumer websites that will do that for you. So if you Google it, or if you just go into ChatGPT or something and say, I have McCormick's 4-pack of food coloring and I don't want to use it. What can I make from home with what I've got? What can I buy on the market? But again, it's going to warn you, if you're trying to make a red velvet cake, you shouldn't use beetroot because it's going to turn it brown, right? And those are the questions that I think consumers are going to have to ask. But you make a very good point that there probably should be a consumer-facing version of this. I'd like to say, I'll have that done by the end of the summer, but I'm moving on to other additives. You know, I'm moving on to high fructose corn syrup replacements and artificial flavor replacements because I want to be able to make the packaged foods that they're buying at the store. I want them to be able to trust them a little bit more. So I'm sure somebody in the consumer side can build an offshoot. They can license it from me. I'm totally fine with that.
So the next phase is not necessarily to do more with dyes, but to move on to other food ingredients that are maybe regulatory requirements, maybe not, right? People are starting to eat more protein and things like that, but that's not because of anything regulatory.
Yeah, you'll start to see these trends happen. Suddenly everything's going to be fiber infused. We're going to see a lot of better for you products that will tout the nutraceutical benefits of the food that you're eating. But what's happening is we can't just sprinkle a powder on things and call that better for you. We know a couple things are going to happen, and that is that the HHS will eventually define what an ultra-processed food is. And then that's going to really shake things up. We already know that there's sodium and then things like mono and diglycerides and other additives and stabilizers that compounded make something an ultra-processed food. And we're also seeing a new generation of consumers who are not interested in the same crap that we've been eating all these years. They're willing to spend something like 23% more for a product that they know and trust, a better for you product. That's a whole category now, better for you. So while I know that there's a deadline on these dye reformulation projects, and I also know it won't be done by then, and we'll continue to see this happen for probably the next 5 years, it's not evergreen. I do know that they're going to decide when to systematically remove things like, I foresee high fructose corn syrup being a real issue with all the GLP-1s and the insulin and the diabetes and the people wanting to reduce their sugar intake. It's only going to make sense that high fructose corn syrup is going to get some real backlash, especially once these ultra-processed foods are defined more specifically. And again, I don't want Cargill or the corn industry coming at me. I'm trying to create a solution-based platform that allows them to ride this shift and mitigate losses so that the food industry can continue to work at a steady pace, but just with healthier products. Did that sound really food geeky?
I think it sounds really exciting. I mean, it's as a, product of the 70s. I
Right?
probably could gain a few years of my life back. It's almost like rewriting recipes for them, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you have to think about the integrity of the system, a la the corn
Listen,
industry, right?
you
So-
cannot guilt the industry, big food, into doing anything. They're always going to prioritize the bottom line first. If I can say to them, you're going to get an ROI 30% faster, you're going to get to market 60% faster. It's going to keep your competitive edge going. That's what these CEOs want to hear. They don't want to hear that it's better for you. They don't care. They want to hear that it's better for the bottom line. And so I'm trying to, I'm walking that fine line, but I'm a staunch activist and advocate for cleaner labels and cleaner ingredients. And I can't just stomp my feet and get them. I have to provide solutions to my industry that I know and love, So,
Yeah, that's a great message too. People say, be the solution, right?
yeah.
Like you've got an issue. Well, that's great. Now everybody can get in there and start to
Right.
solve them.
What is this? You send your message with your pocketbook, and they're starting to feel that. So don't think it's not making a difference. It really is. And now they're looking for solutions, and that's where I came
Hmm.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true because consumer tastes are changing and people are demanding these things now. So that had to kind of happen first, right?
Yep.
So is this a product that you can use in other countries as well? Does it actually factor in the regulatory requirements for just the USA?
Well, it is primarily to solve the United States eminent problem, which is that they have to reformulate by a deadline, right? But we have aggregated data from various regulatory agencies from across the globe, including the World Health Organization, including Codex and JECFA, which are ingredient organizations that scrutinize what ingredients are allowed in food processing and which aren't. So while I have the regulatory data of, say, Canada and the EU, they're not really going through a major reformulation process right now, but their data has helped me understand what has been working for what products in their economies. Because if you remember, a lot of people talk about this with the Fruit Loops. Like maybe 8 years ago now, the EU and Canada decided to ban certain colors that we still use. And so some of these big brands were reformulating them with natural colors, exporting them to Canada and the EU, but
Okay.
not selling them to the United States market. So that's what made a lot of people upset with the Fruit Loops controversy. However, that gave me a ton of wonderful data on what Canadian brands are using as natural replacements, how they were faring on the market, and so on and so forth. It gave me just wonderful use cases because they were 5 years ahead of us, basically.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. And also, if you go to Europe or something and you're looking at the cereal aisle, I love dragging my kids through the cereal aisle in Europe because,
Like, this is what food looks like.
well, they put the bad thing on the front of the box, like you don't
The
have to turn
warning
it around and
label.
yeah, the warning label. Yeah, and I feel like we're finally wrapping our heads around this concept in this country and making
Yeah.
it cool and hip to be healthy.
Yeah. And it's not
Um,
a trend. I think this is a big tipping point for the food industry right now.
Yeah, I think most people agree, I hope. I mean, it'll be a little sad not to have the purple Fruit Loops, but we'll get through it. Are there lessons that can be learned? I think what you're saying is yes, of course. How can other industries take a page from that book? Like, what are some of the things that could happen in other industries that
I know that textiles and fabrics have been also working towards healthier or, natural dyes. Denim companies have been adopting that for a while now. If we talk about technology as a whole, because I can't get specific as to what other sectors of industry are struggling with as much as I can with the food industry, I think there needs twofold things have to happen is that we need to have more adoption and acceptance that AI is here, whether we like it or not. And we have to learn to work with technology if we're going to tell those who make the technology what we do and do not want. We can't fold our arms and not look at it and pretend it doesn't exist because then we'll be very late to the game when it comes to real regulatory and guidelines that need to happen, right? But also Don't be so quick to just fold it into your company and have all these automated agents doing all the stuff for you, all the entry-level office work, and fire half your staff, because AI breaks. Agents stop working. There has to be that human in the loop always. And so there just has to be this little bit of give and take. Let's accept its existence a little bit more, but let's not make sweeping changes to organizations right away. And we got to work together. There are a lot of people out there who've been using AI. I mean, they're OGs. They don't work for the companies, but they know these systems really well. And these are the kind of people you want to be hiring to help you make that change within your organization.
Do you think that consumers have a right to understand when AI is used, just like we used to say, or we still do, genetically engineered X?
100%. I love what the technology can do, what it's capable of doing on the positive side. I'm not cool with people, companies and corporations mining my data all day, every day, so I take steps to mitigate that. I think absolutely you should know when AI is being used for you and on you. We need to tell them what's acceptable and what's not. 100%.
So bringing it back to food one more time, what are the other ways you can use AI in the food industry right now? Are you seeing companies are using it in some other way that we're not aware of that you can shed some light on?
Well, a lot of companies started off using it for marketing purposes, and not in the mining of the data, but in the creation of ad campaigns. So they could take a product and maybe photograph it on a couple of different angles, and AI could now create a 3D model of that product, and then they could put that product in any setting that they want to. There's also a lot of robotics. We forget that that's also AI. A lot of warehouses are using it, and we're going to see a lot of the more, I want to say, dangerous roles. Like, there's a reason why the person who runs the fry machine always has the most workers' comp cases, like statistically, because it's a dangerous machine. There's splatters, it's hot, there's greases on the floor, you slip, you fall. So you're going to see a lot more automation in those highly liable human positions. I think the best way that food brands, especially the larger ones that have been around forever, is that all of their data is siloed, meaning, HR has their own way of keeping records, marketing has their own way of keeping records, and then you've got Salesforce in the middle, and that's where the untangling process needs to start happening. And that's where I would say, for the administrative side of big corporations, start there. Get people in to untangle all of that data that's held in different programs and different divisions, and start finding out a way that you can really incorporate that, because that's when the magic happens. That's when AI can see all your patterns from all your different divisions within the same company and really start to give you more precise analytics.
So what would you say is most promising in terms of the types of things that could really revolutionize the food industry?
What's the most promising? I still think that AI has the capacity and the capability to revolutionize our sustainability. The things that it can do for farmers, for, again, pattern predicting. AI will have the capability, if it doesn't already, to tell you that a tornado is going to hit within this 3-mile square block probably tomorrow at 3:09 p.m. It's going to get that good. And it'll be able to tell farmers exactly what day to plant those seeds based on wind patterns and rain patterns. Alternate pesticides. Don't get me started on pesticides. I think it has this amazing capability in regenerating a lot of the damage we've done to our earth. I think it also has great capability in the medical industry. We just have to pull some of these data owners and AI owners back from whatever planet they're on right now and remind them that that's what this was built and intended for, not some of this other stuff that you're doing with it.
That's great advice. I hear a lot of promise in what you're saying about sustainability and crop yields, which is great for just farmers and their lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Right? So much risk involved in farming now, partly because of climate change.
There's something that's going to be taking effect in 2028 called the Supply Chain Safety Act. And what it's going to do is it's going to be like a those little air tags, Apple air tags that people put on their luggage and stuff that they can find their, right? Yeah. So it's going to be like that, but it's going to be on the food. So it's going to be able to tell you what day and what time it left that farm and when it went to the processing facility, what day and time it left that processing facility and went to the food manufacturer who's now putting the ingredients together, then when it went to the shelf, right? It's going to trace that all back. It's going to really reduce the amount of recalls on foodborne illness that we see. And it's going to give traceability, accountability, and transparency to a lot of food brands that haven't wanted to provide that. And I think that's where AI could play a really wonderful role.
Yeah, I totally agree. It kind of reminds me of if you buy a bottle of fancy olive oil or something, sometimes
Yeah.
it has that
Has the
entire
stamps
story
of
on
all
the
the
back.
places.
Who doesn't love that, right? Okay, so let's fast forward 5, 10 years.
Okay.
Given what you just said, what's going to happen?
I think we're going to be okay. What's going to happen is that everybody's going to go through a bit of a very uncomfortable change for a while. Whether it's that your job isn't necessarily a job anymore, and that's what you've been doing for 20 years. Whether it's that you are uncomfortable with how swiftly the changes are happening in society or in economy. People don't like change, and we're right smack in the middle of one. I think if we're lucky, we're going to see some amazing breakthroughs in cancer research and other infectious diseases. Fingers crossed. I know it's capable of it. And I think the food industry is going to be the healthiest and cleanest it's ever been. We have some of the most amazing young food innovators and food scientists in their 20s and 30s right now that don't have the mindset that profitability and better for you are mutually exclusive. They see major profit margins in these new innovations and better quality. Cleaner science is really what it boils down to. This new generation of clean science, they're advocates of it, their innovations are really remarkable. And they won't be able to sustain that or continue it, artificial intelligence technology. And so that's one way it will really help us. And also close that socioeconomical gap between who can afford the good food and who gets the really cheap, bad packaged foods.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you next is could this result in more affordability of good, clean, healthy food?
I think it's going to have to. They've been hiding behind this, well, we need preservatives and we need packaged foods because it feeds the world, right? You can't put, cold milk on a hot truck. That's absolutely true, but we have gotten way out of hand with the way that we've manipulated a lot of these preservatives and additives into just non-food products, just anti-food products that have served no nutritional capability whatsoever, and really most of them introduce new food allergies to people. So these packaged foods as a whole are going to start to have to get better. You can't say, well, anything under $2 can be crap food and anything above can be wholesome. You have to change it and reformulate it across the board. And as we see more better for you ingredients start to become the commodity items instead of artificial dyes or high fructose corn syrup, which are dirt cheap, you're going to see some of these more wholesome flours and ingredients, seeds and legumes. The prices are going to just go way down on them for food manufacturers because everybody's going to want them and more growers are going to grow them. And so the supply and demand will even out. But that'll take a while.
I wanted to ask one more question so people who are interested in this area can kind of follow along. What's a good resource or we can learn more about what's happening in the food industry?
On the consumer side, there's one called Grow to Market, and it's a Substack, GROW to Market. And that is, it's sort of like for food brands to see who's coming into the CPG world, but it's great for consumers to know that too, because mostly all of the new brands in the last 5 years are all better for you products anyway, right?
Okay. Thank you so much for coming in and telling us about DyeConverter. This is really exciting. Now I have one more question, and this was from my daughter. She wanted to know what your best cuisine is that you actually make.
I am a big fan of traditional French peasant food, like Julia Child stuff, like a beef bourguignon or, coq au vin.
Right.
And the reason why is because they would take the entire animal and then they would dump a bunch of wine on it and slow cook it for like 8, 10, 12 hours. And so you can take a very inexpensive piece of meat and have it just come out just chef's kiss, delightful. And so that's why I really love some of that old-fashioned French cooking.
Okay, I'm glad I asked. That is a great answer. Thank you. We'll leave on that note, and then I can link to some Julia Child recipes in the show notes as well. Thank you so much. This has been a delight, Kelly.
And thank you for allowing me to just geek out on food science for a whole hour.
It's our pleasure.
This podcast is an original production of Women in Product. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the Women in Product YouTube channel. Leave us a review so that others can discover us, or share this episode with someone you know. Original music provided by Jimmy Hahn. Thanks for joining us.